Hey guys, it's Caden from Team CLB, and today I'm bringing you my newest Cubic deck profile. Cubics is a deck that tends to like to go second to break the board of whatever you're going against, and hopefully OTK, if you're lucky. Overall, it's pretty fun, decently competitive, and yeah, let's just start with the profile. First, we've got the most important card in the deck, Duza, the Meteor Cubic Vessel. He says, on summon, foolish a cubic card, so send one from deck to grave. And at any point in the turn a monster was sent to your graveyard, he can increase the attack of himself by 200 times the number of cards, or times the number of monsters in the grave with a different name. So he's not once per turn, so he comes up to loop and link climb a lot. And all in all, best starter in the deck. You can't run any less than 3, and he gets the job done usually. Next, we've got the boss monster, 3, Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. He's unaffected by the activated effects of monsters with an original attack of 3,000 or less. So he can't be tributed by Nibiru, negated by Dragoon or Savage, stuff like that. If he destroys a monster by battle, he can attack again, and then during the end phase, he does 3,000 damage to both players, and that damage can in fact force a draw. He's really good for getting overboards because not a lot of boss monsters, aside from like UCT, can generally out him easily. So he's just hard for some decks to deal with. Next, we've got 3, Vijam, the Cubic Seed. He's kind of debated on how many you should run. I'm running 3 because one of the spells boosts by the number that you have. So it's just really good to have as many as you can. After he battles, you can move him to the spell and trap zone to give your opponent a cubic counter, which negates the effects of whatever it battled and says it can't attack. And the cubic counters are permanent even if you use his effect as a spell and trap to summon himself back. Then next, we've got 1, Buster Gundil. Buster Gundil says you can send 3 cubics from field to grave to summon himself. If he's summoned that way, he's at 3k. He can attack 3 times, and if he's sent to the grave by an opponent's card, battle, or effect, he can target 3 cubic monsters in the grave, special summon them, and then add a cubic card from deck or grave to hand. So he can, like, if he's destroyed, he can summon 3 and then add himself back and summon himself back out. Then next we've got Giragail, aka Cowboy with Wings. He says you can send 1 cubic from face up field to grave to special summon himself. If he's summoned from the hand, he does 800 burn damage, and that's really all the important effects because we're not running the fire one, so he can't actually search for his desired target. So that kind of sucks, but he does summon himself at 800, so he's not always a 0/0 at least. And then for the end of the monster lineup, we're running 2 copies of Eldritch. He's just here to pitch the spells and traps for spot removal, and he can become 3,500 points of damage when you need him to. All in all, he's pretty good, but you don't want to run 3 because that can get a little cloggy. But yeah, that's what we got for monsters. Moving on to the spells, we've got 3 Cubic Dharma. This says you can discard a cubic card to draw a card. You don't take damage from attacks involving cubic monsters, and you can banish it from the grave to target a cubic monster in grave and add it back. Then we've got 3 Cubic Karma. This says you can target a cubic except for Vijam. Send up to 3 Vijam from hand or deck to grave to increase him by 800 per. This is good for getting over big things, like if your opponent negates with Dragoon, you can just make your Crimson Nova 5,400 and punch over it. If a Vijam is special summoned by the effect of a cubic during your opponent's turn, you can send it to the graveyard and have their life points, and then you can banish it from the grave to search a cubic monster, and none of those effects are once per turn. Next, we've got Cubic Wave, which is arguably the best tool in the deck for OTKing. It says target a cubic monster and 1 monster your opponent controls, double the attack of yours, have the attack of theirs. Even if theirs is unaffected, it still works because the doubling applies first, which means even if their monster leaves the field, your monster still gets really big. And you can banish it from the grave along with any number of cubic monsters to target monsters your opponent controls equal to that number and give them cubic counters, which, just like with Vijam, negate the effects, say it can't attack. And then, since we've got so many graveyard spells and traps in this deck, we're running 3 Foolish Burial Goods. It's honestly like a pseudo-Rhoda, because it sends Karma a lot of the times, which can search, and it sends the card that you use to link climb later with. That's really all that matters with that. Then we've got 1 reasoning. You've got 3 different normal summonable levels. It can send a lot of cards from your deck to the grave when you need it to. It's good for pushing through boards when you need to, or forcing negates when you need to. And then, because we like to play GOAT format, we're running 3 monster gates on top of the reasoning. Same thing. With one of the trap interactions later, it can start your link climb because it's an extender that you need. And it just gets cards in the grave fairly regularly. Then we've got 3 super polys, and yes, I play 3 different rarities because for some reason I open them more often that way. This is mostly just for breaking boards. It's really handy when you're up against things like Dragon Link where they have 2 monsters of the same attribute or something, because we have a lot of different attributes in this deck: wind, light, dark, etc. It's just good all in all for breaking boards. It discards your spells, not much else to say about it. Then for our 1-ups, we've got 1 Feather Duster because we don't like spells and traps. 1 Mind Control because, like, if you're up against something that makes Dragoon, you can take their Verte. Unless they negate it, then you can send the Super Poly to break the board that way. And then we've got 1 Instant Fusion because it summons Millenniumize or Mud Dragon, depending on what you need for the scenario, and just helps you play through interaction a lot of times. And it's also an extender to start your link climb. And then for traps, I'm on 3 copies of Unification. This has an effect when it's activated to Fusion Summon, but it doesn't come up a whole lot. But if a cubic leaves the field, which means even if your opponent takes it and they link it away, you can banish it from grave and summon a level 4 or lower cubic from hand or deck, ignoring summoning conditions, and that turn it can't be destroyed by battle or effect. So the loop is like Duza, send Unification, get the Duza off the field, summon another one, and link climb with them. And then for the last 2 cards in the main, I'm on 2 copies of Cubic Ascension. You can run 1 or none of this if you want to. It's an attack redirection. If your opponent attacks, you summon Vijam and force them to attack it instead. Then Vijam can activate if you want, or it doesn't have to. And then you can banish it from the grave if your life points are 2,000 lower than your opponent's. And special summon a Vijam from your hand, deck, or grave. And then if your opponent was the only one with monsters at that point, you can summon 2 more as well. So that's all I've really got for the main deck. On to the extra deck, we've got our Super Poly targets, 1 Triphia Veridum for when you have 3 darks to break, 1 Starving Venom for getting rid of 2 darks and just trying to OTK through a board, 1 Dragostapelia. This is what you usually use to get over Dragoon, because you can also get a spot removal for whatever else they have, or a spot negation, sorry. 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp because it can protect your later plays. Sometimes you can summon it off Instant Fusion if you really need to. I wouldn't recommend it, but it does come up. And then 1 Millenniumize Restrict as our Instant Fusion target because it says target a monster in grave or on field, equip it to itself after a monster has used its effect, and for the rest of the time that it's equipped, Millenniumize says that the effects of that card are negated. Then we've got our 1 Xyz as Dweller. We usually only make this going first, but sometimes, like if we're in an Unchained match or something like that, we can make it going second and just say that we don't have to worry about floating effects and stuff. That comes up a decent amount. It's pretty good. Not much else to say about it. Then for links, we've got 1 access code for the link climb and punching our opponent for game. 1 Avermax because sometimes it's a boss monster that decks just can't out without something like a Dragoon, which not everybody runs. So it's pretty good. Bomber Dragon is really good because it's 3,000 attack base, so it doesn't work on Crimson Nova, so you can like summon Crimson Nova to its zone, nuke all monsters on the field, but your Crimson Nova stays. 1 Unicorn because it's the best Link 3 target that you can run. You could also run like Topologic Trisbaena as well, but this is just a good card all in all for the Link climb. It gets a card out of your hand, shuffles something away, helps you break the boards. That's it. Phoenix, same thing. Link 2, discards a card, pops a card, breaks your boards. Helpful in the climb. Not much else to say about it. Then we've got 1 Masquerena for going first. We usually make like Masquerena Dweller or something like that. It's just pretty good for breaking the boards, pretty good for making the boards. Not much else to say there. Then we've got 1 Verte. We can sometimes make this if we don't have access to a Super Poly and we need it. We can make this, send the Super Poly. They have to negate it, or they don't. Whatever happens in the match happens. 1 Link Kuriboh because Vijam's level 1 and it does force a cubic to leave the field, so it procs your Unification and Grave. Can get you another monster when you need to. It can keep you alive. And then 1 Anima because sometimes you want to go on the offensive with your Vijam rather than the defensive. And this is just where it comes up the most. You make this, you don't get a card, and punch. Alright, that's it.